And here we go.
Sports!
I listen to you guys all the time.
It's awesome.
I'm in the mood for one of your classic anecdotes.
Give yourselves a round of applause. All right, that's enough.
Hey guys, there is someone I want you to meet.
Dave Hooker Show with Caleb Calhoun on Off the Hook Sports. Represented by T. Scott Jones, banksandjones.com, Tennessee's trial attorney from the Ted Russell Ford Lincoln Studio, East Tennessee's #1 volume and customer service dealer, Ted Russell Ford and TedRussellLincoln.net.
I mean, look, we're all part of the same team here.
Now to the Dave Hooker Show on Off the Hook Sports.
All right, here we go with Caleb Calhoun. I'm Dave Hooker. The show represented by Banks & Jones, Tennessee's trial attorney, banksandjones.com, from the Ted Russell Ford Lincoln Studios, East Tennessee's largest volume dealer. Don't forget to support our sponsors. That's why we're here. We've got a big show on tap today. Lamont Butler of Kentucky. We were talking about him last week, if he was going to be healthy or not. Now he's healthy, and he's predicting the Vols get beat, that his Kentucky Wildcats will indeed be victorious. He's willing to go out on a limb, somewhat Joe Namath style. We'll get to that. Today's tough question. Also, I'll share that this day in Tennessee sports history. This is odd to me. Nobody below a 10 seed and no mid-majors in the Sweet 16. Actually, it's not odd. I'm going to tell you why it's happening and will continue to happen. Also, will the Vols prove they can win games with tight officiating? Bank on it. This team does not have to be overly worried about what may happen with the officiating, and we thought that might be the case in the tournament. Caleb, how are you, sir?
I am good. How are you doing, Dave?
Yeah, didn't we thought that the officiating would actually hurt Tennessee, but in retrospect, maybe they play defense so well, or good, as coaches like to say. Maybe they play defense so well it doesn't really matter.
I think that, and also I think, and this we talked yesterday about Rick Barnes changing his style of play in the middle of a game where he turned up the tempo. It's much easier to to call a tight whistle underneath the basket in a half court game, but when you're pressing and doing controlled chaos and trying to force turnovers at half court, it's much harder for officials to catch fouls in those situations.
And the officials don't want to. Well, most don't. I didn't when I officiated. Maybe they do, and sometimes I think they do want to be a part of the show. But at some point when you're calling, and trust me, Caleb, when you're doing middle school basketball, you're calling a lot of fouls. And at some point, you don't want to be a part of the game. So maybe, just maybe, that's what they're thinking. But they certainly seem like they like to be a part of the show. TV Teddy, shout out to you. All right. This Sweet 16 matchup, is it the Vols' biggest game ever? And I'm not just throwing this out there for no reason. Chris Lowe, who has a great knowledge of the University of Tennessee, of ESPN, I know well. And he posted this, if we can share that post. And there was some blowback pretty quickly, as you would expect, from people that said, oh, you got two Elite Eight matchups. But I'll tell you why. I think Chris may be on to something. Today's tough question brought to you by Banks & Jones, Tennessee's trial attorney, banksandjones.com. Let's make it a simple poll question. It is today's tough question as well. Just, is this Tennessee's biggest basketball game ever? How about that? Today's tough question now brought to you by Banks & Jones, Tennessee's trial attorney, banksandjones.com.
Today's tough question. Boom. You heard that. Now take it. The Dave Hooker Show with Caleb Calhoun. Represented by T. Scott Jones, banksandjones.com, Tennessee's trial attorney. From the Ted Russell Ford Lincoln Studio, East Tennessee's #1 volume and customer service dealer, Ted Russell Ford and TedRussellLincoln.net. Now to the Dave Hooker Show on Off the Hook Sports.
Is this Tennessee's biggest basketball game ever? Ever. Tennessee, Kentucky, they've lost 2 to the Wildcats. It is an opportunity to advance to the Elite Eight. When I asked Caleb this question this morning and shared Chris Lowe's tweet, if we want to pull that up at some point, just let me know, Caleb.
Yeah, I'm pulling it up right now.
When he was immediately like, bigger than the Elite Eight? All right, Caleb, your thoughts, because here's Chris's. I go back to Vols Hoops second ever NCAA tournament appearance in 1976. An upset loss to VMI in Charlotte with an injured Bernard King on the bench almost 50 years later. I believe this UT-UK Sweet 16 matchup is as significant as any tournament game the Vols have played since then. Caleb, thoughts?
Yes, and
Message board, thoughts?
And addressing before I pull this off, Chris Lowe was asked how it can be more significant than the 2 games they played with the Final Four berth on the line, including last year at Purdue. And he said more the feel. Also, third straight Sweet 16, experienced team that's been on big stages, and it's historic. First NCAA tournament matchup with biggest rival. Of course, they're all significant to this point.
Right. And I want to say this really quickly. Chris Lowe is not Stephen A. Smith. He tells you what he thinks both on and off the air. I can attest to that. So this is not some sort of let's throw out a social media post and get a big reaction, because I like doing that.
I totally agree.
Okay.
I got to be honest. Given what I've been saying from the start of the NCAA tournament, yeah, I have to say it's their biggest game. And here's why it's bigger with the 2 Final Four berths on the line. From my perspective, what have I said since the start of the tournament, Dave? I said the only barrier for Tennessee to reach the Final Four was the Sweet 16. I said they'll either lose in the Sweet 16.
You did say that.
Yeah. I said they'll either lose in the Sweet 16 or make the Final Four. My point in saying that was that the Sweet 16 matchup would be tougher than their Elite 8 matchup. I think Tennessee matches up with Purdue and Houston better than they match up with Kentucky. And so this is a bigger game just in the sense that I think it's Tennessee's biggest hurdle to their first ever Final Four. But then also, you're right. I mean, you can't just factor when games are to determine if they're big games or not, or what you're playing for. And to take this to football, for example, and now I know football is different because...
Can I give you a quick basketball example?
Sure.
I thought the whole UT-Memphis game is the greatest moment outside of a tournament victory that's ever been a part of Tennessee basketball. Leading up to it, I thought it was overblown. It paid off, but that doesn't always happen.
Right, exactly. I was going to get to that, funny enough. The Tennessee-Memphis regular season basketball game, to me, what has been the biggest game in Tennessee basketball history to this point. I got to be honest, I'll say that. And to give you a great example of this, Dave, when we talk about it, now, again, part of this is just the nature of college football, because college football for the longest time only had a 2-team playoff, and I thought it was better that way, but we don't have to go down that road. But I'll say this. Let's talk about the 1998 National Championship season, Dave. We talk about Syracuse, Florida, and Arkansas before we talk about the Mississippi State game in the SEC Championship, don't we? Even though the SEC that got them the SEC Championship game.
Yes.
And
great.
So
I just want to throw in there off the hook tracksuit. That's pimping. Thank you, Travis. Go ahead. It wasn't supposed to be. Now I'm worried about wearing this to a business meeting. Go ahead.
So it's a Sweet 16 game with a chance to go to the Elite 8. It's a game against your biggest rival. Winning it would, put it this way, we can say this straight up. Because they didn't win those 2 Elite 8 games we're talking about, with Tennessee having a chance to get to the Final Four, winning this would match the furthest they've ever gone in the NCAA tournament. It would be their biggest win ever against an opponent. It would be their biggest win ever. There's not even a close second.
You also, how much do you consider the rivalry? The fact that they're 0-2.
Well, that's part of it. That's what adds to it.
Okay. Well, now I agree with all that, but I can't say that it's bigger than Elite 8 wins that would take you to the Final Four.
But they haven't gotten an Elite 8 win yet. So I'm saying at least for that 2-day period, put it this way, if they beat Kentucky and lose in the Elite 8, which I don't think will happen, this Kentucky game would be their biggest win in history. There's no other, you can't name another one that would be a bigger win. Now, if they win in the Elite 8 to go to the Final Four, I still think there's an argument for that Kentucky game, honestly, because that's the one that I would say got them there. But, going back to, I guess we could say 2000, right? When you covered that Sweet 16 matchup versus North Carolina, where Jerry Green didn't know how to adjust to a football player being in the post in that game.
Okay, but how about this? Going into the North Carolina game, and by the way, Derek points out it's a European gangster tracksuit as well. So thank you for that. Apex Apparel in Knoxville, by the way. So they're fantastic. They'll take care of all your apparel needs. But Caleb, going into the North Carolina game, that would be an opportunity to knock off North Carolina, which is a blue blood, and even more of a blue blood. Sorry, Kentucky fans, than you are. I mean, if you're in the ACC, you got a notch on everybody else. That's just a fact. So
And also, I mean, North Carolina's had more success in the post-integration era, which you have to weigh.
yes. So going into that game makes me look back at that and think, man, I thought the fans were pretty excited, pretty fired up for that. Today's tough question: is this Tennessee's biggest basketball game ever? We'll get to the poll question. We want you to vote, and be sure you know that we're here at 10 a.m. and wherever you podcast. Today's tough question brought to you by Banks & Jones, Tennessee's trial attorney, banksandjones.com. Why Banks & Jones? Well, it's because they're Tennessee's trial attorney. You can play to win with Banks & Jones because they'll go to trial. You've heard of other lawyers. They say they'll go to trial and fight for you. They won't. They just want to settle. That's the easiest way out. Well, that's not Banks & Jones, led by T. Scott Jones. They won't settle. They'll go to trial for you. Tennessee's trial attorney. They play to win. Truly, Tennessee's trial attorney when it comes to criminal defense or personal injury. Why settle? It's Banks & Jones. T. Scott Jones. Banks & Jones. All right, Caleb. Is this Tennessee's biggest basketball game ever? Yes or no?
Yes. I am an emphatic yes that this is their biggest basketball game ever. I think that
I don't know how you can go there when we're talking about Final Fours that are on the court to be taken. And Tennessee's been in that situation twice.
They have. I mean, they lost both times, but again, this is to me, and again, maybe I will be eating crow more than anybody else, but this to me is a Final Four on the line. Like that, I guess that's where I'm saying this is for a Final Four berth because I think they're a lock to win the Elite Eight game wherever they go. I think they just have to get past this game, honestly.
Okay. I feel like I continue to support your side, even though I'm arguing the other side, which I believe in. I think that an Elite Eight win into the Final Four is much bigger, and going into that, you felt the pressure of the moment, and they certainly did. But any of those other teams we've talked about, I didn't think had a chance to win a national championship. We haven't discussed that. When you look at this basketball team, and we're talking about expectations of a game, that's what we do. That's down the road, and a team that we don't know the true potential of. Yeah, still. If I believe more so than any other team, Caleb, this team has a legitimate shot to win a national championship. I never thought that with the other group. Even last year's crew with Dalton Connect, I thought they leaned too much on him, even though I loved him, loved watching him play, and that they would eventually stumble. And they did when they came across an indestructible force. So, Caleb, more than any other team, this one is set to win a national championship if they win.
Yes, I think so. And I think to your point, I actually disagree. I thought last year's team did have a great chance. I think this one has a better chance, but I thought last year's team did have a really good chance. The Purdue matchup was just a tough one, but the other runs they made, I think you and I would agree, like that first Elite Eight run they made in 2010 with Wayne Chisholm and all that was a luck of the draw Elite Eight, right? They got it put in the right bracket, the right teams lost. They got to face the right opponents for the right matchups, but we didn't think that was a national title caliber team, honestly.
Yeah, I didn't.
Yeah. So I agree. This one actually has the talent to potentially win the national title, which which speaks a lot more than what we thought we were talking about before. But that also to me adds to, that's why I think this is the biggest game. It's hard for me because you bring up these chances to go to the Final Four, but there's chances to go anywhere in the NCAA tournament, and we still think that Memphis game is bigger than a lot of those games historically. So,
oh yeah, I mean that did more for the program than the win over Winthrop.
Oh, absolutely, 100%.
Yeah, and really going back to my point on that, I think the AP also kind of felt that a little bit, and that's why they made sure that they were 1 and 2 in the country at the end. Because what I've found is that basketball writers, more so than football writers, really love the sanctity and the health of the sport, so they'll do what they can to help it. I've noticed that through the years, but I mean that paid off.
Yeah, football will do that too.
Yeah, football guys are just kind of like, it's going to be here. I'm just, covering this team for now. It's kind of what they're like, which I don't know is a great way to put it. Coming up, stat of the day. Also, this day in Tennessee sports history, Jemai Mashak says championship run is for Rick Barnes and not them. I've hinted at that because I think that's the case. But first, what the H? We'll do that right now as Kentucky's Lamont Butler says, quote, we're battle tested and we're going to win that game. Talking about the Vols. Johnny Unitas, ladies and gentlemen. No, not Johnny Unitas. Joe Namath would be the guy. Pretty nice.
What the H?
Wow, I never worked hard on anything. What a cool life.
For real? The Dave Hooker Show with Caleb Calhoun. Represented by T. Scott Jones. ThanksandJones.com. Tennessee's trial attorney. From the Ted Russell Ford Lincoln Studio, East Tennessee's #1 volume and customer service dealer. Ted Russell Ford and TedRussellLincoln.net. Now to the Dave Hooker Show on Off the Hook Sports.
Coming back from an injury, it appears as if one young man is willing to shoulder the load. Lamont Butler guarantees a win against Tennessee, saying, quote, we're battle tested and we're going to win that game. Is this trash talk, Caleb?
I think it is, I guess the nicest way to say this, I think this is getting caught up in the heat of a moment. I think this is.
How so? When was this quote? Because
this was right after Kentucky beat Illinois and beat them pretty convincingly when we thought Illinois could have a chance to upset them. Lamont Butler is high in the moment. He's in a post-game interview. He's talking about how they've beaten Tennessee twice. He said something like, we beat them twice. We're battle tested. We're going to win that game. Now, the funny part about that is that Lamont Butler has not really been a factor in beating Tennessee. I don't think he was in either game, was he? I'm going to look that up real quick, but
he definitely wasn't in the second game.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, he missed right at 10 games, may have been 9, but he's had a shoulder injury. That's why I tell my little stupid joke in the beginning. I can do that because my shoulder's shredded. So I mean, I'm allowed to do that. But it could be a heat of the moment thing, but I'm using this, especially in this day and age in social media where something will pop up that somebody posted 3 days ago, and I don't even really realize that it was that dated. Caleb, I'm using this. If we want to go to the clip, let me know. But I'm completely using this as if I'm Rick Barnes, and I'm putting it up everywhere. Portions of the program brought to you by Hound Dogs of Knoxville. Champions look good in orange. HD Knoxville, hdknoxville.com. And they recently moved some stuff around. Looks fantastic in there. Plenty of things to look at. You will love it if you find yourself in orange more often than not. So, Caleb, is this motivation for Tennessee? We asked that age-old question.
Yes, I think this is motivation for Tennessee. This is absolutely extra motivation for Tennessee. And this is, you bring up Joe Namath. It's funny you bring him up. I always go back to Rasheed Wallace. When I
don't remember Rasheed's. Very underrated player, by the way.
Oh, very underrated. If he wasn't in the same era as Kevin Garnett and Tim Duncan, we'd be talking about him in a much higher esteem than we do.
Or if he was born 10 years earlier.
Oh, that's true. Yeah.
He would have been like a Kevin McHale type cat. Go ahead.
That's very true. So Rasheed, when he got traded to the Pistons midway through the 03-04 season, that Pistons team goes on to win the NBA Finals where they upset Shaq and Kobe. But in the Eastern Conference Finals, they were underdogs against the Pacers. They lose to the Pacers the first game, and Rasheed goes, they're not going to win game 2. I promise you guys, they're not going to win game 2. And then the Pistons go and win game 2. So he comes through on his prediction. The next year, the Pistons and Pacers are again locked in a playoff series. And the Pistons lose at Indiana to fall behind 2-1 in the series. And Rasheed in the post-game interview was like, got to give them credit. They played well, but we're definitely going to go back to Detroit with this series tied 2-2. Don't worry. We just can't afford to lose the next one. So we're not going to. And he came through on it again.
If you're playing Off the Hook Sports Bingo and you're in the message board, go ahead and tell me that you had Rasheed Wallace on your bingo card because I didn't see that one coming. Go ahead, Caleb.
I'm just saying, Rasheed did it twice and made good on it. I think partially.
Kevin Burnett did the boldest one. And
that was epic.
And I laughed. I mean, inside, I didn't laugh in a press conference. That'd be rude. But I internally laughed. I was like, there's no way this team's going to Atlanta. Plus, that was the old, where I guess it still is, the way the other team had to lose 2 before you had an opportunity because the tiebreaker. So I was like, that's not going to happen to Florida. They're not going to lose 2 games. But that's a pretty bold prediction that I was a part of and saw it play out.
Yeah, and for context, Tennessee had just lost to Auburn at home 34-10 in a 34-10 blowout. They're playing Georgia the next week. Georgia's number 3, and Georgia's got a national title contending team, and they've won 4 straight against Tennessee, having won the previous year 41-14. And Kevin Burnett says, we will see Auburn again in the SEC championship game. And people are like, what? And Tennessee goes and upsets Georgia that weekend. And one of the classic case of Philip Fulmer leading a double-digit underdog on the road and winning. That's something he had a habit of doing that in the early 2000s. So, yeah, those all felt like.
Said, I think that it could be a rallying cry for Kentucky.
You do,
just like when Kevin Burnett did that. You want to back your guy right now, your guy that's dealt with a shoulder injury, the guy that, I mean, you can spin this however you want to. And I'm sure Mark Pope is going to do that. But trust me, I mean, I can handle some PR. I could spin this in a way that it would help my team as much as it would help the other team.
Here's where it's a little different. So when Rasheed Wallace was at Detroit, I'm just going to give the examples we gave real quick of all of them. Wallace was
bingo.
Rasheed at Detroit on the road with Indiana. Indiana was like, we didn't really know how the teams matched up. They didn't have much of a history because Wallace wasn't at Detroit during the regular season. Kevin Burnett at Georgia, Tennessee was a massive underdog, right? So it just seemed laughable. Joe Namath in the Super Bowl, that was in response to the fact that, in case you guys don't know the history, the first 2 Super Bowls, the Packers won in a blowout, and in the 3rd Super Bowl with the Colts playing the Jets, the AFL have been getting blown out so much. If the AFL lost that badly again, there was already talk of them disbanding the Super Bowl and just stop this NFL AFL playing thing. They actually thought there was a consistent belief that the AFL was clearly a step below the NFL. And Joe Namath came out with that statement because he was tired of hearing that about the Jets with the Colts. And
as so he was laying next to a pool with models around him.
You're right. He was struggling a lot.
Joe Namath.
But no, that's the honest truth of all that.
In person, by the way.
So what?
A great man in person, by the way.
Yeah, you mean like when he's sexually harassing sideline reporters?
I'm just talking about my interaction with him.
Did he sexually harass you?
No, he didn't. He was very nice. He was a great gentleman. As a matter of fact, he pushed security away so that he could talk to me, which is pretty cool.
And then he said, he said, when I heard Hooker, I was thinking something else.
Harassing. I mean, if you go up to somebody that's that drunk, you should know that you're about to get harassed. Go ahead.
Oh, wow. Okay. Wow, Dave defending it.
I don't know how he walked out on the field.
I don't need. Well, that day she probably didn't know he was drunk till she got him on camera right then.
I don't know. That felt like you were getting somebody out of the middle of surgery. Go ahead.
The point is, this isn't that. Even though Tennessee's favored in this game, they're 4.5-point favorites, and maybe Kentucky's taking it personal that they're 4.5-point favorites. Nobody's writing off Kentucky, are they, in this game? I don't know how anybody's writing off Kentucky saying, oh, Kentucky's not going to win this game. Now, Kentucky may take it personal that they're underdogs. They're probably upset about that after sweeping Tennessee in the regular season.
What is the spread? I haven't seen it.
Tennessee 4.5.
That's bizarre. I mean, as much as I think that Tennessee's going to win, would anybody take Tennessee and the points?
I might.
Oh gosh,
I might. But I think it's going to be tough. Steve Hamer on yesterday kind of convinced me of a few things where he talked about Kentucky doesn't play defense, how Tennessee just had a very unfortunate shooting night in both games.
Let's get back to the trash talking again. So I do think that was a spur of the moment thing. I do think if I'm Rick Barnes, I'm using it to absolutely set my team afire is hopefully the case. But I don't think it helps. And here's the reason why. It's the NCAA freaking tournament. The guy, I mean, I've been around programs that know when it's tournament time. Dude, they're locked in. Even the most weird basketball players that Tennessee's had over the years. And they've had some interesting ones. Fair?
Yep.
Okay. They were locked in this time. When I went to practice, they were locked in. In other words, I think you can try to use this, and you should try to use it if you want, but I don't think it has much of an impact at this time of the year, Caleb. If this were December and Ohio State said this about you because they just came off a win against I don't know, St. John's, and they're all excited about their Thursday home and home with Tennessee, whatever. Yes, I think it would be a huge factor because basketball can get soft in practice. I just don't think in March it's a factor.
I don't think it's a factor for this team because this team is so experienced. They're so veteran and senior laden that
That's another very good point.
Right. I think traditional other Rick Barnes teams may have been able to do it because here's one thing Rick Barnes, I love Rick Barnes in a lot of ways, but I think Rick Barnes, Dave, has one of his flaws is I think he's so focused on coaching up fundamentals and teaching and coaching effort. I don't think he has the psychological skills that other coaches do. You know what I mean? Like to teach players how to tune things out. Or I don't think that's one of Rick Barnes' abilities as much. Like Nick Saban knew how to get players to tune out the positive press that they were getting.
No, that's a great point. And I don't want to just bring up the Cowboys randomly, but Jimmy Johnson had a major in psychology. So he would yell at Michael Irvin because he knew he could take it. He'd just give Troy Aikman a bad look. And he knew that the next day Troy would be dialed in at practice. So that's doesn't feel like Rick Barnes, does it?
No, it doesn't.
It feels more along the lines like he's the librarian who is just going to tell you where the book is, whether or not you have a 800-pound head or you're a normal person.
Yeah, Rick Barnes is like, I'll take you to the lake. Now you got to figure out how to drink. Like it's
fish.
Or fish. Yeah, sorry, to fish. Yeah, you got to figure out I'll take you to the lake. I'll teach you how to fish. But I'm not going to push you if you're not fishing in the right part of the pond. And I told you not to fish there. I'm not going to get on you to tell you to go move to the other part of the pond. Like that's on you at that point.
Travis says, as long as the team doesn't treat this game like it's a Final Four game, I'm not prepared to beat Kentucky and then have a letdown game. Well, let's not even go there, but let's go there. So if Tennessee beats Kentucky, this plays into Chris Lowe's point of maybe the most anticipated game or biggest game or however he phrased it. So it plays into his point. Again, I'm arguing the other side. I don't think it's that big. I think it's the Elite Eight games were bigger. But along those lines, this isn't a team, Caleb, that lacks maturity and could get ahead of itself whatsoever. I don't think that's the case. But if Tennessee wins this game, how much do you expect them to advance to the Final Four?
I expect this. I still maintain. I think they're a lock for the Final Four if they win this game. I think they match up so well with Houston and Purdue. First of all, let's point this out. There's a really good chance Purdue beats Houston, and you don't think Tennessee, after what happened last year, really, really would love to get a second shot at Purdue?
Sure. Yeah. Absolutely.
So there's that. Houston wins. Look, I'm going to go to the home court factor. I think if Houston wins in Indianapolis, Tennessee's going to have way more fans at that game than Houston is. And I think they match up really well.
Size of the school.
Yeah. No, I agree. So I think Tennessee will have an effective home court advantage against Houston and Indianapolis, funny enough. And so,
right.
Yeah.
Sorry. By the way, hit that like button. Thumbs up the like button. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to interrupt you. If Tennessee versus Maryland happens, then Caleb has to recuse himself because he has a degree from both places, right?
Yeah, that actually is a really good point. But I'm the most those of you guys who know me here, if you think I'm this objective about Tennessee, why do you not think I'd be as objective about Maryland? I'm pretty darn objective I'm the negative Nancy for Tennessee. You don't think my Maryland friends think I'm way too low on Maryland all the time too?
I can't even imagine.
I'm just apparently a hater. I'm the one who says the Grizzlies aren't going anywhere with Ja Morant, and everybody in Memphis loves Ja Morant.
Don't know how you can go anywhere other than the gun store with Ja Morant.
Stat of the day. They never lie. Or do they? Stat of the day. The Dave Hooker Show with Caleb Calhoun. Off the Hook Sports.
All right, Caleb, stat of the day. What do we got? By the way, whether it was stat of the day because he's X number of years old, I think he's 49 maybe, or whether it was this day in Tennessee sports history, I don't understand why you did not include Peyton Manning's birthday yesterday in something somewhere.
I did. You went to this you went to this day and you mentioned Peyton Manning and I said I like that one and I was going to mention it, but I got a better one.
Okay. Stat of the day today brought to you by Double D Piping Fire Protection Contractors, providing around-the-clock service, protecting their customers' lives and properties at all times. Caleb, what do we got?
On this day, I'm sorry, this is the stat of the day. Over the weekend, in their round of 64 win over USF, the Lady Vols hit 16 triples. That set the SEC record for 328 made three-pointers in a season. 14 more than the second most by Arkansas at 314. Then they went and they're just extending their lead on that. So they already broke it by 14 in one game. They extended it to 24 with 10 threes over Ohio State on Sunday. So Tennessee already has the SEC record on the Lady Vol side for the most three-pointers made in the season at 338 by 24 threes, and they're still playing basketball.
Interesting. Pretty good stat of the day. Stat of the day, again, brought to you by our good friends at Double D Piping.
Double D Piping provides full-service fire protection on any scale. From residential homes to government facilities, we can assist any customer through design, fabrication, installation, inspection, and demonstration of fire suppression systems. With 30 years of service across 5 states and a full staff with over 40 years experience, our quality can't be beaten. Don't get caught watching what you could have prevented. Call Double D Piping, the absolute best in
Ginger Power, the Dave Hooker Show with Caleb Calhoun. Represented by T. Scott Jones, banksandjones.com, Tennessee's trial attorney. From the Ted Russell Ford Lincoln Studio, East Tennessee's #1 volume and customer service dealer, Ted Russell Ford and TedRussellLincoln.net. Now to the Dave Hooker Show on Off the Hook Sports.
All right. I'm looking at the message board. Somebody says, this white boys and lame something jokes. That train is never late, which I guess that means we're 420 to Yuma. We're doing a great job. So, but I just respond, I'm white. I know my jokes are good. You can't dent those. You want a long Norm Macdonald style joke right now?
Let's go.
No, you don't. You absolutely don't. And I would not do that to you. All right. Let's turn to, I don't think it's trash talking at all, but it is something. Jemai Mashak with some pregame talk as well, as he talks about the motivation for Tennessee. The show represented by Banks & Jones, Tennessee's trial attorney, banksandjones.com, as we're live from the Ted Russell Ford Lincoln Studios, East Tennessee's largest volume dealer. You'll be so happy you went with Ted Russell Ford or Lincoln, tedrussellford.net, tedrusselllincoln.net. My buying experience was unbelievable as I was in and out just a couple of hours spread over 2 days. Super easy. I found what I liked, and he was like, that's pretty good selection. And so I went with that. I love my Jeep, and whether or not it's something used like I went with or a Bronco or whatever the case may be, Ted Russell Ford Lincoln, Ted Russell Ford Lincoln, tedrussellford.net, tedrusselllincoln.net.
Like a blast from the past, the Super Dealer is back. Look to the skies, Knoxville. The Super Dealer is fighting for price, service, and the American-made. Ted Russell Ford is East Tennessee's #1 volume Ford dealer. Save up to $4,350 on a new Ford F-150 XLT, or get into a new Ford Ranger XLT with no payments for 90 days. Come see the Super Dealer today at either Ted Russell Ford location, Parkside Drive, or...
All right, Caleb, are we playing a clip here from Jemai?
Yeah, and so starting us off, Jemai Mashak was talking about a Final Four run and potentially going to the national championship. And he made a point that this is not for him. This is for Rick Barnes. And here is his exact quote. And we're going to play it now.
You know, for me and Z, I've talked to him about it. This Final Four run and national championship run isn't for us, it's for him. You know, we win, we love winning, we love getting the recognition, but we want it for him for most of all. And I think that's just the main thing, is trying to win every game for Coach Barnes, because he deserves more recognition than he gets.
Okay, I come away from that just thinking that's incredibly strong. Incredibly strong. And my first response to this when we talked about it this morning at our 3:45 a.m. production meeting, Caleb, was, oh, it's a little trite and it can make you a little bit tight in pressure situations. I am not of that mindset after hearing that young man speak. Click the thumbs up if you think that's really impressive, because it is. That's a That's a man that has maturity beyond his years. I've covered a lot of guys that's been the opposite of the case, or they were as mature as you would expect a 17-year-old to be. But that to me is a man showing up to work and wants to look out for somebody that looked out for him. That to me is motivation. If you don't think that's motivation in this day and age, we hear too many sound clips, and I don't know what to tell you, Caleb. I was very impressed by that.
Yes. And, Zakai Ziegler Jemai Mashak has been as loyal of a Vol as you could possibly be. And again, I've told this story before. Like I said a little while ago, Rick Barnes is not going to psychoanalyze you. He's not going to play you psychologically. He's not going to try to develop you into somebody who wants to be developed under him. You're just going to have to want it. And if you want it, though, he can make you a great player. And Jemai Mashak embraced that from the second he stepped foot on campus. Remember, Jemai Mashak's first year at Tennessee, he was a 4-star recruit now. Very highly touted, only played 5 minutes a game. Then the next 2 years, he became a rotational player, but he was a backup playing less than 20 minutes a game both times. And yet through it all, he stayed with the program. And you saw, you can tell this is a family thing because when players were hitting the portal last year, Jemai Mashak's mom was getting on Twitter and just being like, how are getting kind of upset with people leaving Tennessee. And she was like, why would you want to leave this? Why would you want to leave Rick Barnes? I mean, the family of Jemai Mashak, they love Rick Barnes. They're very high on him. So that speaks to Jemai Mashak. And I know he sounds like he was speaking for Zakai Ziegler, who's the other 4-year guy on this team. But the same is true for Zakai Ziegler. We're talking about a guy in Zakai Ziegler who came from nothing in, was it the Bronx or Brooklyn? I think it was the Bronx, where, I mean, his freshman year, his home was burned. The place he grew up in was burned down in a fire. He lost all his belongings. And his whole family had to be relocated because of it. And so he's been dealing with that while playing at Tennessee for 4 years and has really just become, honestly, one of the most beloved players I've ever seen at Tennessee, to the point where I think we forget this. When Zakai Ziegler was the backup point guard his freshman year to Kennedy Chandler, who was the lottery pick, 5-star, one-and-done guy, fans wanted Zakai Ziegler on the court more than Kennedy Chandler, funny enough. And I think they have felt the love from the fans, but you're right. They really, because they've embraced and bought into Rick Barnes and what he does, they really, really love Rick Barnes. And they really, I think these are two guys that they take it personal, the lack of respect they feel like Rick Barnes gets. And I think Rick Barnes sees them as he does view them almost as his own kids. And that's what Rick Barnes does with a lot of the players that buy in, that stay loyal to Rick Barnes. He does look at them as his own kids and feels like he has the same responsibility to them.
Dylan says it's nice to see a guy playing for his coach and team other than playing for a paycheck. I think there are times that we get too caught up in, and I'm more guilty than you, probably watching this show or listening to this show. I'm more guilty than you in that I can be critical and cynical. And I believe there are times when a quote's thrown out there because it's orchestrated and they want a certain response from either the media or somebody else in the world. I just think this is a guy that felt like he could open up a little bit. I don't know why this was the time right after they advanced to the Sweet 16, but if that's been a motivation for him, good for you, young man. That's really impressive.
I think it's because he's probably being asked a lot about him and Zakai. It's their last year because they're out of eligibility. So do they want to make a splash? And he's like, I think he's making the point, like, we want it for Barnes more than anybody else. And I think they really want to put an exclamation point on Rick Barnes' legacy. And I mean, these are two, for the record, I think Rick Barnes tries not to play favorites, Dave. Let's be honest. Given the way Mashak and Z play, if Rick Barnes could name his favorite players to ever play for him, they're in his top 5, aren't they? Both of them.
Definitely Ziegler. I don't know. And no coach will ever answer that question, by the way. But listen, if you want to go to, I'm not trying to be mean here, but if you want to go to war and you're in a foxhole, would you rather be with Zakai and Mashak, or would you rather be with Igor and Darlingstone?
Yeah, God, Zakai and Mashak.
I mean, you're dead. You're dead meat on the ladder.
If you're in a bar fight, do you want Zakai or Jemai, or do you want Igor and Darlingstone?
I'll take the 5'9" guy.
I will too. It's kind of like that's funny you say that. I mean, not to go back to the Pistons Pacers, but they're not as reckless as Steven Jackson, But Steven Jackson was that type of dude, right? When the whole Malice at the Palace happened and Artest goes into the stands and Jermaine O'Neal's fighting, Steven Jackson has nothing to do with it. He's like, I got to go in there and fight somebody because my boys are fighting. And so he's like, I got to get me a punch in.
That's the way it should be. I mean, I'm loyal to a fault. It feels like they are as well. Now, the flip side of this, you get in a tight game and you put more pressure on yourself, Caleb. That to me, with not as much, and not as much with basketball. Well, I take that back. Basketball shooting, it's about touch. I just go back to when Andre Dickerson told me the Florida Week, and you've referenced it a couple of times. And I said, what's different? He goes, the coaches get real tight. So I'm not saying he would get tight necessarily, Meshack, but I do think there's a flip side of that in some cases. Not sure it's applicable here, where you just put more pressure on yourself and you're more likely to flub up at the end of the game. In a tight game. That's why I thought that Tennessee would lose in the final minutes to Houston, which I'll stand by, but I like this Tennessee team a lot more after what they did on Sunday or Saturday.
I think where it's different is that Zakai and Jahmai are not just trying to play hard for Rick Barnes. They're extensions of Rick Barnes on the court. I think Rick Barnes, one of the reasons he's been able to hang around, I think he hasn't had to coach as much this year as he's typically had to coach in the past.
I think it feels like when he goes to practice, he has 5 assistants.
Yes.
And 2 would be Zakai and Meshack. And I think they go to practice and they make sure everything runs smoothly. And we've talked about this with the 98 football team. The players ran practice and they told the coaches who was dogging it. The 2 guys at the beginning of the year that transferred, or what did the other guy do? I can't even remember.
Cameron Carr, JP Estrella. Or Cameron Carr, and that was the end of the season. You're talking about at the beginning in the off season.
Yes.
Well, Jonas Ado and Toby Awaka.
Yes. So, I mean, I just think that those players got reports back from the current players led by Meshack and Ziegler that off-season workout's just okay. And I think you go into preseason camp and you're down a step, and suddenly it's Rick Barnes who runs very difficult practices. And like, I don't know if this is good, but you trim the fat in some ways. And I think we all saw how last year there was some fat trying to defend Purdue.
Exactly. So with that in mind, it's funny you bring up the 98 team too, when we talk about extensions of practice. What does it allow a coach to do when that happens? We just talked about Rick Barnes just throwing a wrinkle that he had probably been ready for all year because he was
and O's. Is that what you're looking for?
Yes, it allows you to do more X's and O's.
Press.
Yes.
3-quarter press and get better at it. I know they did it earlier in the year, but just get better at it.
Exactly. This is why David Cutcliffe did such a good job with the 98 team. He didn't have to worry. The coaches didn't have to worry as much about developing certain players. All David Cutcliffe had to be like was, all right, I got to figure out what offense to install with a totally different quarterback than what I had last year. Isn't it? And by the way, that's still underrated how much he just 180 the exact offense he ran the year before with Peyton Manning.
Totally agree. Yeah, no, I completely agree. They were very scared to throw the football at all.
Yeah. And so Rick Barnes has been able to do that now, focus on X's and O's, because the only player he's somewhat had to develop has been Chaz Lanier, because Chaz Lanier is a senior, but he's a one and done kind of guy coming from a smaller level. But you can tell Lanier is a veteran who's fully, whatever else you want to say, he's fully been buying into what Rick Barnes has been coaching him to do. A heck of a lot more than Darlington. And maybe that's why Darlington Dubar's not on the court. Maybe he's struggling to buy in. And Rick Barnes is like, I don't have time for you to buy in. I got 6 seniors and a good team.
He did have a passing in the family.
Yes.
So I don't want to overlook that. David says, I'm impressed with Lanier. You see that he knows he has dogs in his corner who are letting him cook. That is true. Yep. I'm going to be the guy, though, given how I covered Tony Harris, that Tony had a similar problem. He would not be as aggressive as he needed to be. So did Vincent Yarbrough. Until I see something different consistently out of Chaz Lanier, not just shooting the intermediate and outside shot, but also taking it to the rack. And I know we're in late March, and it probably is not going to happen at this point. They're going to have to win with what they got. But I'm not a big Lanier guy until I see that. And I know what he did in the opening round, and I know he's been good in the NCAA tournament, but we're talking about outside shots and jump shots. So, Caleb, your thoughts on that, as we remind you that portions of the program are brought to you by Newbert Collision Center. For nearly 50 years, Newbert Collision Center has been East Tennessee's best choice for quality repair work and fantastic customer service. Remember it, Newbert Collision Center. It is right down below if you want to click on that, or joenewbertcollision.com. Your thoughts on that take, Caleb?
So Chaz Lanier, I don't have a problem with it as much. I think he was doing, particularly the UCLA game, he was coached to play the way he played because of the defense and the press that they were running. The reason I'm not as worried, and you're worried about his mentality, I can't say that's as much of a problem. He's playing tough defense, and here's why. Here's where he's different from Tony Harris. He's got one. As a senior and a veteran who has been well coached over the years. He's mature. That's one. Unlike Tony Harris, he's mature.
Well, I covered Tony as a junior and a senior too.
That's what I mean. Tony wasn't mature as a junior or a senior.
Okay, yeah, Tony did not mature. I thought you were just referring.
Tony's development was stalled by all the adults around him. You know Tony from a personal standpoint with his coaching. I know Tony being from Memphis and his uncle and the people that were really shopping him around coming out of high school.
Oh, I agree.
Tony Harris.
Yeah, I'm aware of all those. Yeah, no, there's no question. He did not land in the perfect spot.
No, yeah, he did not have the right adults around him. Chaz Lanier is playing for one of the best coaches possible to develop you as a man. He's got two leaders by his side in Jemai Mashak and Zakai Ziegler that are going to help hold him accountable. Whatever else you want to say about those Jerry Green teams, Dave, we talk about Tony Harris. Nobody was a leader on those teams. Your best leader was Ron Slay, and he was a sophomore before Jerry Green was fired. So,
True.
There was no real senior-laden leader those years. Say what you want about Isaiah Victor, Charles Hathaway, those guys. I don't see those guys as guys that could truly lead and bring Tony Harris along the way they needed to.
Agreed.
Yeah. So with that in mind, you got players that are veterans and mature, and you got a coach who works to bring out the best in his people. Chaz Lanier has a much better support system, not from a talent perspective, but from a maturity perspective surrounding him than Tony Harris ever did at Tennessee.
I agree with that. And with Chaz too, there's a defined role, right? He's the two guard.
Yes, exactly.
With Tony at the end of the day, no matter the guidance he had around him, was a tweener.
And also he had a coach who knew Chaz has a coach who knew what he wanted out of him, whereas Tony had a coach who didn't know what he wanted out of him. Yeah.
Amen. He went from the 1 to the 2 to the 2 to the 1 to the 2 to the 1 to the 1 to the 2 each and every offseason.
But he was folding his arms on the sideline, Dave, so he knew what he was doing.
A silver fox folding his arms on the sideline. You got a chance. Hemp House, the premier hemp dispensary online with a wide variety, great selection, and strict standards. Hemp House Chat, 2Ts.com. Hemp House Chat with 2Ts.com. Use the promo code HOOKED for 10% off. That's HOOKED for 10% off. In 2 minutes, you want to tease for it? Oh, what's our poll question? Where are we at our poll question?
Is Tennessee, Kentucky, the Vols' biggest basketball game ever? And my side's winning, but I'll tell you about how much.
Okay. And also, if you can, give us a tease of this day in Tennessee sports history, which is coming up.
It's a Lady Vols game, this day in Tennessee sports history. And also, we're going to talk a little bit about the lack of Cinderellas in this Sweet 16.
Yeah, that to me, I can explain it, and I will do so. And you'll be like, wow, I'm smarter because of Dave. And you'll be able to carry yourself for the rest of the day knowing that you learned a little something, because I can explain to you why there are no Cinderellas, and I'll do so right after this with Caleb Calhoun. I'm Dave Hooker, Off the Hook Sports, the show represented by Banks & Jones, Tennessee's trial attorney, banksandjones.com, the Ted Russell Ford Lincoln Studios, East Tennessee's largest volume dealer.
Why Banks & Jones? Well, it's because they're Tennessee's trial attorney. You can play to win with Banks & Jones because they'll go to trial. You've heard of other lawyers. They say they'll go to trial and fight for you. They won't. They just want to settle. That's the easiest way out. Well, that's not Banks & Jones, led by T. Scott Jones. They won't settle. They'll go to trial for you. Tennessee's trial attorney. They play to win. Truly, Tennessee's trial attorney when it comes to criminal defense or personal injury. Why settle? It's Banks & Jones. T. Scott Jones. banksandjones.com.
Now in its 45th year, the second and third generations continue Joe Newbert's commitment.
His vision of what this business needed to be, we still try to live up to that.
Joe Newbert Collision Center.
Community banking is about location and much more. It's about family. We reside in your community. We are a part of your community. At Commercial Bank, our commitment extends beyond the walls of our branches. It's displayed each day in the opportunities we provide, the money we give back, and the time we commit, all to help improve the lives of the people, families, and businesses that make our communities great. Commercial Bank, life made better.
Hi, Mike Davis here with City Heating and Air, reminding you to always dare to compare. Our team provides quality local heating and air service, installation, and maintenance across East Tennessee. We use only the best equipment like American Standard heating and air conditioning for your residential, new construction, or commercial needs. Honesty, dependability, and customer satisfaction have been the cornerstones of our business since 1961. City Heat and Air.
There's your bear.
Are you ready to get strong? At NFC, we offer top-notch weight training and functional fitness, so you can build strength and improve your performance. Join today at nfc1.com or stop by any one of our 7 East Tennessee locations.
Like the name, but serious or something. The Dave Hooker Show with Caleb Calhoun, represented by T. Scott Jones, banksandjones.com, Tennessee's trial attorney. From the Ted Russell Ford Lincoln Studio, East Tennessee's #1 volume and customer service dealer, Ted Russell Ford and TedRussellLincoln.net. Now to the Dave Hooker Show on Off the Hook Sports.
Caleb getting roasted on the poll question, the message board. Roasted, Caleb.
How am I getting roasted? I'm winning.
I'll tell you what. All right. The show represented by Banks & Jones, Tennessee's trial attorney, banksandjones.com, from the Ted Russell Ford Lincoln Studios, East Tennessee's largest volume dealer. Hit that thumbs up button if you're just jumping in. We appreciate that when you do that, because that helps us bring our show to more people, which is good for us, and support our sponsors. We are free both on here and offthehooksports.com. And we encourage you to be a member of the channel if you would like, but you don't have to enjoy the content. So please go ahead and make sure that you follow us wherever you may be on social media. Caleb's a great follow, especially on Tennessee Titan Sundays.
And oh my gosh, I'm reading more that we're going to draft Cam Ward. I cannot believe it. I wanted Shador so bad. We had the chance to get Shador, and the Titans are like, "Hey guys, let's go screw it up again."
Well, I will go ahead and promise you, the Titans are not going to do anything exciting like a draft Shador Sanders. They don't want that. They don't want their direction and leadership questioned. So they are not going.
They don't want to win. They basically are following the Jerry Jones model now.
Exactly.
Losing.
Yeah, no, it is just. Lose comfortably. That's the goal. Is pretty much lose. Well, not lose comfortably for you. That's what Jerry Green did for his entire career. When it got to March, he would lose where it was comfortable. It's like, okay, let's just talk about some spring football, or let's talk recruiting when it used to be in spring sport. That was kind of how people were okay with it. I don't think Tennessee fans are okay with that type of basketball ever again. I'm going to explain to you why there have not been Cinderellas. There have not been mid-majors in the Sweet 16. I'm going to give you the reason, and it is 4 downs, and it's brought to you by our friends at Ted Russell Ford Lincoln Studios.
Where do you stand? Hot or cold? Brought to you by City Heating and Air Conditioning. Integrity matters. 50 years in East Tennessee. CityHeatandAir.com on Off the Hook Sports.
All right, Caleb, I want you to pull something up if you don't mind. And that would be the list of transfers from the 2024 season. In other words, the basketball transfers that occurred before this past season. Can you pull that up, please? If you don't mind, I would say that you go with 247 Sports, but you can do what you want to, because here's the reason there aren't Cinderellas, and they're never going to be. And we're going to get to 4 downs. Caleb, right. The best players that can change the direction of a team, Dwayne Wade Marquette. The best players that can make a team into a bubble team or even a Cinderella team do not exist, because Steph Curry's a great one. I wish I'd have thought of that one already. I might write something about this today. Steph Curry's a great one. Best example I could think of, actually. So they are not there anymore. Steph Curry is playing at North Carolina or Duke his last year instead of Davidson. Because why don't you pull up, if you got the transfer portal guys from last year, the St. John's guy, I think, was the #1 guy, right?
Right. Kadari Richmond.
Okay. So he's been hurt this year, but I think we can agree that St. John's is somewhat of a basketball power. It's easier to do this, be a power in basketball.
I mean, the thing about St. John's is they're an old school Big East team that plays in Madison Square Garden.
Right.
And I mean, I'll just tell you guys this, having lived up here, like the way you guys think with the culture and the love of SEC football, like that is how like old Big East basketball was in the New York City area. Like that they had the exact same love for that culture of college basketball.
Right.
There.
It's a solid program. So I don't want that to throw my point off.
With a heck of a coach.
Yes. Right. All right. Who else?
All right. So Omar Balbo went to Indiana. John L. Davis transferred from Florida Atlantic to Arkansas. AJ Storr went to Kansas. Norcad Omier went to Baylor. Tucker DeVries went from, I believe he went to West Virginia, if I'm not mistaken. I believe ended up going to West Virginia. They were on the bubble this year. Great Osabar went from Utah State to Washington. Kobe Johnson went to UCLA. These are the top. I'm just going through the top 10 right now. Javon Small went to West Virginia. Chaz Lanier's number 10 went from North Florida to Tennessee. Jeremy Roach went
they've all gone to people that spend on NIL money. I don't want to call West Virginia and Tennessee basketball powers per se. St. John's would probably have a better argument than Tennessee. But I will say that those are all places that were willing to spend money. So to get Hendon Hooker paid, which a lot of you wanted, me included, you have to deal with an alternate state of affairs in which you are not going to see Cinderellas make the Sweet 16 or beyond anymore. I'm sorry. Those guys are, I mean, you've got a Darling Stone Dubar aside, or an Igor Milichik that could, in different circumstances, be a star at another smaller school. They're just kind of extras for Tennessee. It's not good. I mean, the NCAA tournament, as you knew it, Caleb, just 5 years ago, with Georgia State making a run, 7-8 years ago, that's done. That's over. It's not going to happen. Not only are the mid-majors and the other teams that are not of the same ilk of a Tennessee that can spend money, they're lessened, but Tennessee's, for instance, their voids are filled. They've got guys they can lean on, and they're not losing guys to the portal that they don't want to lose. No offense to the guys that left. Caleb, am I right or am I wrong?
You know, I came into the show today thinking you're right. But then I found some more stats and I found some more data. And I think you're actually wrong. And I will
would not be the first time.
Yes, we both agree that it's not that this is going to continue. Here's the issue. Here's what's really happening. So the stat I pulled up is this is the fourth time in the last 8 years without a mid-major in the Sweet 16. So yeah, fourth time in the last 8 years, going back to 2017. Never happened from 1985 to 2015. But if you go back 8 years, Dave, that's pre-NIL and that's pre-transfer portal. Here is what's causing it. The rules changes in college basketball are less conducive to upsets. And what I mean by that is from 1985 to 2015, you had a 35-second shot clock. You had a three-point line that three-point line was incredibly short, remember? Incredibly close to the basket.
Yes.
That was basically designed. You had no charge under the basket, by the way. I mean, no blocking foul under the basket. Meaning if you had a big guy, he could just camp out and stay under the basket and do this, and you couldn't score, and he wouldn't get a foul called on him. And so, yeah, no defensive 3 seconds, no charge under the basket. You had all these different things that basically allowed less talented teams to win. College basketball, rightly, I would agree, changed a lot of those rules. They finally have the blocking foul under the basket. They moved the three-point line back. They shortened the shot clock to from 35 to 30 seconds, so lesser teams can't hold the ball for 33 seconds and then take a shot at the end. All of that together made it much harder for less talented teams to pull upsets in the NCAA tournament at the clip that they were pulling upsets. Doesn't mean it doesn't happen, and it can still happen, but it's less likely to happen. So now upsets actually carry value, because when the upsets actually happen, you can look at them and say, oh, that's a legitimate upset, not some gimmick set up by college basketball rules to do it. So with that in mind, I think that the rules changes, which are much more like the NBA now, they make college basketball a lot more like the NBA with its rules changes, are what have led to less teams scoring upsets in March Madness.
All right, let's get to 4 downs, because we'll have Caleb. He's got some other ideas too of why this may be happening. I feel as if I just told everyone while it's happening, but you just don't like it at all, do you?
I'm not saying you're wrong. That's what a lot of people think, but I think it's actually more.
A lot of people. I think I came up with this on my own. I've not heard anybody say that. All right.
Cooper Mays here. Hit like and subscribe.
All right.
Coop here. First down.
All right. First down is this. Was it a fluke or a trend? Well, you know where I stand. I think it's a trend, and will continue as long as NIL and the transfer portal are a thing, which they are going to be forever. So you?
I think it's a trend, just for a totally different reason. But yes, I totally agree. It's a trend. I'm not debating you on that.
Okay. Coop.
Cooper Mays here. Second down.
Did NIL kill Cinderellas? Well, you know what I think. I just think you're going to be hard pressed to find a team that can match up 5-on-5 with the powerhouses of the sport. And if you don't have a special player, which can change completely the way you play and the way you're viewed, if you don't have that special player, Caleb, I think you're going to languish against a team that's probably better from 1 to 12.
I think no, NIL did not kill Cinderellas, and it didn't kill mid-majors. And the reason it didn't, and the reason it didn't is I can just go to last year. I'm sorry, guys, we're forgetting this. UConn is a mid-major. They're back-to-back national champions. They got bounced out this year, but they have won back-to-back national champions in the era of NIL. NIL existed last year, and 11th seeded NC State made it to the Final Four. So it's a trend that there are fewer upsets than there were, but that does not mean that it's impossible. And NIL is not what's making it impossible. What's happening is the rules changes. The rules changes are making upsets less likely and harder to do, which is what it should be.
Okay. Disagree, but there we go.
Tennessee center Cooper Mays here. Third down.
Is this good for college basketball? This is a tough one, because we're talking about college basketball, not the NCAA tournament, right?
Right.
Okay. It could lead to some closer matchups in the regular season, but I don't think that the regular season is going to suddenly flip-flop and be a big boost for the sport. I think it's all about what happens in March, and I think it hurts March. So while I have conflicting thoughts on whether or not it's good for college basketball, I think the overriding factor is it will hurt the tournament, and that will hurt college basketball.
I think it's good for college basketball. This is crazy because, one, I don't think Cinderellas are dead. I think they're less. They're going to be less and less common. So what does that mean, Dave? When they do happen, there's going to be more value behind them. You probably were so sick of upsets, you didn't even think about it when an 11 seed made it to the Elite Eight, right? It was just too common. It wasn't special.
Oh, no. I think that stuff's pretty cool. And get to hear about, Mother St. Mary, whatever.
Sister Jean, Loyola Chicago. But here's the other part. Here's the other part of this, Dave. Here's the dirty little secret. People say they love the upsets for March Madness. They're not watching March Madness looking for the upsets. They're watching March Madness just because they're casually watching it to see how their bracket's doing.
Oh, I disagree. I want the upsets.
No one, Dave, no one watches Here's what happens. Here's what really happens with the upsets that everybody loves. No one's watching the game because they don't see the upset coming. And then you're told that with 2 minutes to go in the game, oh, this could be an upset. So then everybody turns it on. Otherwise, they're watching the games that have the most impact on their bracket. And the brackets aren't going anywhere.
Okay, I disagree. That's not how I consume it. But Dylan says, I get UConn as a mid-major, but we can't sit here and say they're in the same realm as FAU. We do need to come up with a new term, don't we? Because mid-major, Gonzaga was a mid-major that had success in the tournament for 20 years. And then, if you want to, the last numbers I ran, football, this is a long time ago, so I'm sure it's doubled, tripled, whatever. But football was you spent about 8 or 9 times more than you did on basketball to have a competent program. So, in other words, you can be San Jose State Midwestern University of the Chicagos and you can put together a basketball program. You probably can't say, I'm going to put together a football program.
Yeah.
There needs to be another term besides
that. I mean, schools like St. John's, Marquette, Gonzaga, even, I mean, I know they play football, but when you look at the schools that play football, but that aren't like powerhouses, UConn, even Memphis, we talked about them, schools that really care about basketball, like in a major way, like, but are not Power 5.
You just need a couple of big boosters to get that done.
Right.
With football, you need well over a dozen.
But then that's fueling my point, Dave. That's why NIL won't take away the power of the mid-majors, because those mid-majors can just get a booster or two to like buy a couple of players like St. John's just did, and they'll be fine.
Yeah, but they're not that rich. They don't have Pilot walking through the door at their booster meeting.
No, but Pilot's spending all of its money on football. And if you buy, Dave, this is basketball.
Well, everybody's going to be different.
But Dave, if you know this with basketball, if you buy one player, that one player could get you really far in the NCAA tournament.
Dalton Connect.
All SEC center Cooper Mays here. 4th down.
All right, 4th down is this. Will it get better or
worse? Well, sorry,
worse.
I didn't. Yeah. Will it get better or worse?
I like saying the or. I think it's going to be the same. I think that, listen, there's more people that are interested right now in college athletics than ever before, even though it feels like it's turning pro. So I think it's going to continue to trend up. If I were the wizard of college basketball and I could just change things, I think I could make it increase even more, Caleb. But there's a lot at play. So if we get back to my point, I think NIL has killed the Cinderellas. There's not a lot I could do to change that.
I think it's
major conferences would be a great way to say it, David. Thank you.
Depending on where you land, better or worse, because I think fewer upsets makes the sport better, because I actually like watching good basketball, not some fluky over officiated game. That college basketball, that's 90% of the reasons for upsets in March Madness anyway that everybody loved. I think that here's where I'm going to land on this, and bear with me on this, Dave. I think it's actually, if you prefer the stupidity of gimmicky upsets, it's going to get better for you in the next few years.
I don't know why that's gimmicky. I don't know why.
Because the sport was the reason there were so many upsets for the sport. It wasn't because players on smaller schools played well. It's because the sport was designed for less talented teams to win. Okay? They made basketball a gimmick that rewarded mediocrity, a shortened three-point line, a 35-second shot clock, over officiated games. Like, I'm sorry, it rewarded bad basketball. It didn't, like, that wasn't like these teams were playing good. And so the point I'm getting to is this. College basketball is going to go back to doing that. The NCAA, they feel like they know that they are thinking like many other people are thinking, which is that lack of upsets is bad for the sport. So we want to bring some upsets back into the sport. And they're going to think, how can we do that? Let's change some rules that allow for lesser teams to win in college in the NCAA tournament. That's what they're about to start doing. They're about to start changing some rules. They're going to do ridiculously stupid things to try to allow it in the NCAA tournament.
Well, I like the upsets. I mean,
I like them when they're legitimate. They were not legitimate with the 35-second shot clock.
You try telling a young man who's on that Georgia State team.
Was it Georgia State or was it VCU, or I'm trying to remember.
Any of them, pick one. You try to tell them that's not legitimate.
It wasn't. I'll tell it to their face. It was a gimmick. They got to the Final Four from a gimmick. Okay, if college basketball rules were what those rules should be, okay, they wouldn't have gone that far.
Okay, they wanted more scoring like every other sport. I'm surprised that the NHL hasn't made the net bigger. Seriously. Every sport seems to want more scoring except for hockey. And they wanted it just like anybody else. Do I feel like there were potential for more upsets? Yes, but the other team's playing with the same set of rules.
Yes, but okay, the other teams, here's what it is. It allows for more randomness when you do these type of things. And this is what I'm talking about. You're saying the other team's playing with the same set of rules. You shorten the three-point line. You do a 35-second shot clock. Dave, bad teams can hold the ball for 33 seconds. Not to mention you have 1-and-1, which I think is a stupid rule in college basketball, by the way. If you're in foul trouble, if you get into the bonus, you get 2 free throws when you get fouled. That's how it should be. Okay, it's a dumb rule to have 1-and-1, but that's another rule they need to fix. Okay, but they're seeing this now, and they're going to see one of two things. Here's the other reason it may not be bad. It depends on how the NCAA. Dave, do you think the NCAA is going to think about what's going to draw more viewers, or what are people going to want more? Because they're different. The two things are different.
No.
People are going to want more upsets. They're going to be like, I like to see the underdog win. They're going to do that, okay? But the NCAA is thinking about cash money. And truth be told, Dave, when the bigger teams are in the Sweet 16, their fan bases are watching. So that's better ratings in general.
The show represented by Banks & Jones, Tennessee's trial attorney, banksandjones.com. Pardon me, as we broadcast from the Ted Russell Ford Lincoln Studios. Give me 2 minutes, and we come back with this because I feel like I just learned you, as they like to say in Maynardville. The Vols proved they can win games with tight officiating, why that's a big deal. Also, this day in Tennessee sports history, and Butch Jones is a liar. Not surprised. 2 minutes off the Hook Sports.
It's a new year, a new day, and Ted Russell Lincoln has an exciting new offer to share. Right now, get a 2024 Lincoln Navigator with 0% APR for 72 months and up to $4,000 in bonus cash. Or drive away in a new 2024 Lincoln Corsair Grand Touring with 0% APR for 60 months and up to $4,500 in bonus cash. It's time to get excited about the ride. Come and see what a luxury car experience truly is at Ted Russell Lincoln Knoxville.
Now in its 45th year, the second and third generations continue Joe Newbert's commitment.
His vision of what this business needed to be, we still try to live up to that.
Joe Newbert Collision Center.
Having been in the jewelry industry for a long time in the Knoxville community, I saw a need for a jeweler, a real jeweler.
Our ability to do these designs has really been based on the customers bringing new things in and challenging us as a store. Our goal is not to tell anybody what they want. Our goal is to listen to what they want and then help them get there.
Schedule your consultation today to get your special someone the perfect custom gift just in time for the holidays.
Hi, Mike Davis here with City Heating and Air, reminding you to always dare to compare. Our team provides quality local heating and air service, installation, and maintenance across East Tennessee. We use only the best equipment like American Standard heating and air conditioning for your residential, new construction, or commercial needs. Honesty, dependability, and customer satisfaction have been the cornerstones of our business since 1961. City Heat and Air.
Dare to compare.
Double D Piping provides full-service fire protection on any scale. From residential homes to government facilities, we can assist any customer through design, fabrication, installation, inspection, and demonstration of fire suppression systems. With 30 years of service across 5 states and a full staff with over 40 years experience, our quality can't be beat. Don't get caught watching what you could have prevented. Call Double D Piping, the absolute best in fire.
Frank, like the name, but serious or something. The Dave Hooker Show with Caleb Calhoun, represented by T. Scott Jones, banksandjones.com, Tennessee's trial attorney. From the Ted Russell Ford Lincoln Studio, East Tennessee's #1 volume and customer service dealer, Ted Russell Ford and TedRussellLincoln.net. Now to the Dave Hooker Show on Off the Hook Sports.
Derek says, Butch, pardon? Say something smart, Caleb. Derek says, Butch Jones, y'all really, what's the problem with us not covering a lick of spring ball? We're all into that. They're back on the practice field. We'll cover spring ball right now. They're back on the practice field this morning, and they're going to talk to the media this afternoon. And then we will have our thoughts on Tennessee spring football practice.
Yeah. I mean, it was just, we've been on it. Whenever there's been news, we've been on top of it. Don't worry.
Okay. And I love I do love in retrospect, the Nico kind of heading out the door for spring break. Believe that lying on everybody's lap. It needs to be more of a leader, question his leadership. I don't know the timing of that was particularly good.
Yeah, that's a good question, actually.
He took a little bit of a beating, did it not? And you also bring out Joe Halsey. It felt just so reactive to a report by a guy who has probably never stepped foot on Tennessee's campus at all.
Right, and it also like doesn't make sense. Like,
what's his name? Pickle. No offense to Pickle.
Well, I mean, and it's also like, yeah. I mean, we haven't heard that Nico's like just. It's a little bit unfair. I mean, I will say this: like, is Nico like? I don't see Jemai Meshack or Sakai Ziegler ever in Nico. Put it that way, as a leader. maybe that's good or bad. I mean, that doesn't mean he can't be good, but like that's like a standard of standards, isn't it?
No, that's a pretty high standard. I mean, that's a Kevin Burnett, Al Wilson type of standard. I would agree. So probably not fair to go that route, but can't blame you. Can't blame you for going that route. Let's get to Bank on It, brought to you by Commercial Bank, member FDIC. Life made better. Tennessee has proven after the whistles were blowing, as we expected, in the SEC and NCAA tournament first weekend, Tennessee has done well. Last I checked, they're 5-0 in those tournament games. How big is it that Tennessee has proven as a defensive team that they can win in a tightly officiated game?
This is a huge deal because Tennessee, we knew, was not necessarily built for a tightly officiated game because of the way they embraced contact. And I know that's a little bit odd to say, but with the way March Madness is called, this is why defensive teams oftentimes struggle in March Madness, is because the minute you embrace contact, they will call the foul, and they will do that in the SEC tournament. And Tennessee made it to the SEC tournament title game, in which all 3 games they played, they and the team they played had more fouls called than their yearly average was on them. All 3 games. So 3 tightly officiated games. Now, yes, they lost to Florida, but they beat Texas A&M and Auburn playing that, or not Texas A&M, excuse me, Texas and Auburn playing that style of play. I wrote last week that this could prepare them for March Madness, and boy, it has. Against UCLA in the first half of that game, the refs had a tight whistle. I mean, they had an extremely tight whistle. And I thought for a while that could cause problems for Tennessee into the second half. I was actually texting my brother about it at the time. And then Rick Barnes turned up the tempo. And this is what we talked about earlier. The minute he turned up the tempo, the minute he started forcing those turnovers, the minute UCLA wasn't ready.
And by tempo, the way they weren't necessarily running more as far as offensively, but the way he turned the tempo up, I thought was 3-quarter press, right?
Yeah, it was a 3-quarter press. And it did 2 things.
That was my favorite defense on NBA Live, just for the record. Go ahead.
It did 2 things. It got Tennessee, it threw a new look at UCLA, but it also got UCLA in foul trouble because the rest were still calling those tight whistles, but Tennessee wasn't getting the calls against them. UCLA was getting the calls against them because UCLA was still stuck in a half-court game. So Mick Cronin, in the postgame, people said he was complaining about the refs. I didn't think he was complaining about the refs. I mean, Tennessee would say the same thing if they had lost. Mick Cronin said, you know, we had our 2 best guards getting foul trouble in the first half, so it really messed us up what we had to do. He's right. That's true. Now, Tennessee, what they did is what got those guards in foul trouble. I don't blame Mick Cronin for saying that. I mean, you would say, anybody would say the same thing. If their 2 best guards got in foul trouble in the first half, they would say that's why they had trouble winning the game. And
no, and let's be fair. I don't have it in front of me, Caleb. You probably do. The number of fouls called, it's not like it was one-sided. I haven't heard that contention out of anybody with the Bruins.
No, nobody at UCLA said that. Tennessee shot 16 free throws. UCLA shot 14 free throws. So now there were 19 fouls called on UCLA, and 14 on Tennessee. But truth be told, because of the tempo Tennessee ran, I'm not even going to say UCLA fouled that many more times, but this is where the versatility steps in for Tennessee. Refs who call a tight whistle, like you talked about earlier, Dave, and we both did, they don't catch it as much on a press on a trap or a press at half court. They catch it when you're banging under the basket.
Well, and I've mentioned this before. I've been an official. At some point, you don't want to call every single thing. So if you come out with a mindset that you're going to play hard and physical, and I might have a couple of quick calls on you, generally what happens is that team adjusts their style of play, or the official says, man, I'm calling all these. And it's subconscious, Caleb. It really is totally subconscious. You just feel like you're calling too many fouls. So either that happens or you have a foul-filled game or somewhere in the middle.
Yeah, and sometimes you do just have a foul-filled game. You're right. And the biggest problem is when you play
Teddy Valentine, TV Teddy, who he's called, you're not going to change the way he calls a game. I don't know if he's retired now or not, but he's going to call it the way he calls it.
Okay. Yeah. So what we're talking about is, and you also, and the reason I bring up the press and the flow you talk about not wanting to take over a game. It's one thing to call a foul underneath the basket when a team's running a half-court offense and they're banging under the basket, right? You can call that.
Yes.
It's a lot harder to call a foul when a team's playing fast-paced because you don't really want to be the ref that breaks up the flow of the game, right? When it's going up tempo, because then you are the story.
That's true. Is there any Unsung has a point here. I don't get how the ball handler can slam into the defender and create contact, and the defense gets a foul. I see that a lot. I will tell you that's an incredibly hard call to make.
It is. It is. It's
an offensive foul, especially on the perimeter, which is what I'm envisioning.
I agree, and it's even harder because the rules on when to call what on that are not exactly clear because no one's actually even in the NBA has made a clear point on how to do it.
Unsung, I think refs enjoy controlling the tempo. I completely agree. So, Caleb, do you think that is a factor with Tennessee, or have they overcome that to your?
They don't want to control the tempo of a fast-paced game. They don't. They hate doing that. They get embarrassed doing that. They like to control the tempo when it's a grinded out slugfest underneath the basket where they see a chance for them to become stars. They don't have the guts, most of them, to change the tempo of a game that's up tempo. They don't. And it's also just when it's the same with anything, Dave. What do refs do? A play happens on offense. The other team gets the ball. They're immediately getting back to the other side of the court so they can see what's going on inside the paint, right?
Yes.
So if you're running a full court press, they got to readjust to go out to catch that. So I think that was what was so crucial about Rick Barnes' adjustment. But the more important thing is, and this is a huge part with Tennessee, and this is an underrated part, and we're not talking about this enough. One of the reasons Tennessee is equipped to win tightly whistle games, while they create contact a lot on defense, they draw contact a lot too. And this team shoots its free throws well. I mean, Zakai and Charles Lanier are not going to miss clutch free throws. And I think this is one of the most underrated parts of Tennessee basketball this year. They shoot 74.4% from the free throw line as a team, which collectively is top 100. And their best players, Charles Lanier is 74%, but he's actually getting better. Zakai Ziegler and Jordan Gainey are both 81% from the foul line. Igor Milicic is a big. He's 73%. Felix Opera, a center, is 71% from the free throw line, and that's actually skewed because he was below 50% for the first half of the season. And Jemai Mashak is 76.3%. Every single so Tennessee's top 6 rotational players are all above 71% from the free throw line. That's a huge advantage if you're in a game that embraces contact. You're going to have a big advantage when it gets close.
Let me ask you this. Better coaching move. Heupel running 2 tight ends, as he did in September last year. Barnes going 3-quarter press. Vote on it on our poll question. It is up now. I'll give you the results. Which was a better coaching move?
I have to say Heupel going 2 tight ends because I don't think Heupel had that in his repertoire before the start of the season.
Yeah, he didn't. And in his DNA and his preferences, and insert any word you would like to, right?
Yeah.
That to me was flying in the face of what you would ever expect from him in so many different ways. I'm going with Barnes in the 3-quarter press, though, because I think he did so during, I know he did so during an elimination game. So that to me was really impressive to be able to go outside of your comfort zone. That was the word I was looking for earlier. Heupel was way outside of his comfort zone. Maybe Rick Barnes wasn't as far outside of his comfort zone, but he did so in a championship moment, did so in an elimination game. So I would go with Barnes. Right now, everybody agrees with me, as is usually the case. About 90%.
Agree with me last time.
Yeah, whatever. 90% say Barnes going 3-quarter press is bigger, Caleb. So I'll give you this opportunity to defend yourself.
Heupel's was bigger. Again, Barnes, this team last year ran 3-quarter press at certain times. Barnes was able to turn up the tempo. Heupel went 12 personnel. Yes, he had to. He was forced to, but that doesn't mean he would have done it. A lot of coaches in his situation wouldn't have done it and would have just stuck with their system. No, Butch Jones would not have done it. That's very true.
He would have absolutely gone to the dance with the girl he brought to the dance. There's no question. He would not have changed. Did he change anything philosophically to a great extent during his career? I can't remember.
Not really. No. And
Dylan says Heupel went 2 tight ends out of necessity because our tackles were garbage.
But that's a testament to Heupel to do that. Rick Barnes always knew he had this up his sleeve if he needed to use it because he had players that ran it last year. So I think it was a brilliant move. And to call it in that moment in the middle of an elimination game, and by the way, he called it. Here was the most impressive part about it, Dave. He had to think of that within 2 days of scouting UCLA because the only reason he called that is because UCLA showed something in their first round win that they had not showed to that point. So he had 2 days to think this through, and he put it out. I give him all the credit in the world for that. But I don't think Heupel planned to go 12 personnel until probably a week before the start of the season when he realized he may have actually been in the season when he first realized.
It was probably in the season.
Yeah, so Heupel had to figure that out in the season. And for those who don't know, I'm sorry, it's a lot harder to install a new football formation in a week than it is a new basketball play in a week. It just is. It just is. There's so many more moving parts that you have to do to install that.
Well, hold on now. That's not just a play. You have to have a team that's solid fundamentally, or they're going to foul out of the game really quickly if you go 3-quarter press and you haven't been running it.
Yes, but you have 4 players. We have 4 seniors and 2 guys on your team that did this last year, and they were the heart of that press. They knew what they were doing. Barnes probably just told him, guys, we got to go back to this, what we did last year. We're going to throw this in at UCLA right when it matters most. And then Felix Opera knows how to guard, come up to the perimeter because of the system he ran at Ohio State. So then he just basically told Felix, he's like, look, rather than playing defense under the paint, I need you to deny the pass to the paint. That's not hard. You just tell the center, move up to the 3-point line and don't let them throw the ball underneath. So.
Okay, so should Rick Barnes have done this more?
No, I think it was the perfect time. I can't say he should have done this more. I mean, he got Tennessee as a number 2 seed, and they're fresh for the NCAA tournament. I think Rick Barnes has done a masterful job to this point. That was the perfect time to do it.
I also don't think he could have done it earlier, Caleb. I don't. I think that this basketball team was winning at a high level. He couldn't have pulled that out because maybe you drop a game because they're not equipped to run that. But the other factor is they don't go as deep, Caleb. I mean, I think this team, if it plays any sort of press, even if it's a half-court press, is probably going to be pretty fatigued at the end of the games.
Yeah, that's a huge part of it. I mean, Barnes adjusts to his personnel, and I agree. And thirdly, most of the like we talked about, he spends more time on X's and O's now because of Jemai Mashak and Zakai Ziegler as the leaders. But the one thing he did work on this year, and you can tell, he was working with Chaz Lanier developing his defense all year, trying to get him better defensively. Sure. And I don't think Chaz Lanier was ever in a position until right now to be able to like have Barnes switch to this press and him do what he needs to do.
Our Bank on It brought to you by Commercial Bank, member FDIC. Rick Barnes' 3-quarter press is why Tennessee is in the Sweet 16.
Commercial Bank is your neighborhood bank. What makes us different from other banks? We understand that every customer has unique opportunities, challenges, and financial concerns. We don't expect you to fit into the same box as the next person or business. Whether it's purchasing a home, saving for your child's future, or planning for your next vacation, we're with you every step of the way to navigate life's big decisions. Commercial Bank. Life.
A guy with a lot of jobs, but this one is the most important.
This is not government work. As such, I treat it with care and attention.
Until someone else calls. The Dave Hooker Show with Caleb Calhoun. Represented by T. Scott Jones. BanksandJones.com. Tennessee's trial attorney. From the Ted Russell Ford Lincoln Studio, East Tennessee's #1 volume and customer service dealer. Ted Russell Ford and TedRussellLincoln.net. Now to the Dave Hooker Show on Off the Hook Sports.
A couple of comments on my thoughts. Bank on It brought to you by Commercial Bank. David says Barnes did it in season adjustment at the end of the season. That's harder because it's sudden death game. I agree with that. Caleb says you got to win the SEC tournament at any cost. So he's
what?
Yes. Derek says our team's success is built on good shooting and solid half-court defense. Switching to a press too much might affect shooting in the backcourt. I'll agree with that. You don't want to have dead legs because Tennessee doesn't have the depth to be able to do that. I think there was a reason that Tennessee ran that 3-quarter press too on the second game of the weekend, Caleb. Not that they needed it in game number 1, but you think to yourself, hey, you win this game and you've got some rest. And I think this team is incredibly well conditioned as well.
That's true. And also, they didn't do it that long. They did it the final 5 minutes of the first half, first 5 minutes of the second half until they had complete control of the game. And UCLA wasn't really ready for it. So I agree. It was a wrinkle. It was the perfect time to throw that wrinkle. And it's a wrinkle to just make sure you take control of this game and call it a day. And I think that the big story is this wasn't the first time, though. I guess the real big story is that was a wrinkle that allowed them to not be in trouble with a tightly officiated game.
Yep.
But what we're seeing is that Tennessee has we thought it was a disadvantage. They have an advantage in tightly officiated games because they shoot their free throws. The reason Barnes did this with UCLA is because UCLA can shoot free throws too.
No, I agree with that. I also think that you have to factor this in. Being a lot of these key players are 4th, 5th year guys.
Mm-hmm.
The fundamentals. So I guess I'm recalling your point a second ago where you can do this in basketball easier than you can do it in football. You probably can. But you can probably do it with a senior laden team a lot easier and not worry about them getting a ton of fouls called against them in the 3-quarter press.
Oh, 100%. You can definitely do it with a team that
their hands out. They're not inside the body. I mean, you can watch how they play. Have we done this day in Tennessee sports history?
No, we have not.
Why don't you just tell me to hit the button?
Hit the button, Dave.
This day in Tennessee sports history.
It's cool, baby. It's cool.
Now you know, and knowing is half the battle. The Dave Hooker Show with Caleb Calhoun. Off the Hook Sports.
All right, Caleb, what do we got? Yesterday was Peyton Manning's birthday. Maybe today's T. Martin's birthday? He comes right after.
Are you calling it Peyton Manning Day?
No, just a week.
just a week?
Yes, just an entire week of the Sheriff. By the way, the Sheriff is the worst nickname that any sports figure has ever received. I don't know where that came from, but it is absolutely horrible. It doesn't describe him whatsoever. I don't understand why the Sheriff stuck. When that first came out, I thought, this isn't going to stick. It's going to be gone in 2 weeks. But sure enough, here we are, the year of our Lord 2025, and Peyton Manning's still called the Sheriff by some. I have no idea.
Someone has some real beef.
I don't know why I have such a beef with that nickname, but I do. I don't know why, but it just rubs me the wrong way. Go ahead, Caleb.
Yeah, it sounds like it. What is wrong
with
Dave? Okay, so on this day in Tennessee sports history, the Lady Vols beat Marist in the Sweet 16 in 2007 to go to what was their 6th straight Elite 8. Now, here's why that's significant. That, at the time, tied a school record for most consecutive trips to the Elite 8 in Pat Summitt's era. However, to that point, in that 6th straight year run to the Elite 8, Dave, they still hadn't won a national title in any of these 6 years because in their first 3 years of doing it, a Final Four and 2 runner-ups, they kept getting eliminated by Diana Taurasi and UConn. Then they choked a game against Baylor in the Final Four. Then they lost in the Elite 8 to North Carolina the year before that. So, but this time was the 6th time was a charm. They beat Marist to reach the Elite 8 and then end up winning the national title. And then the next year, they reached their 7th straight Elite 8, which remains the most consecutive Elite 8s they ever made it in the Pat Summitt era.
Okay. Interesting. I like that. Tennessee, by the way, when on the men's side, I heard this stat and I guess I knew it, but you said it today as well. We're talking about Tennessee basketball that I felt like if they made a run to the Sweet 16 was like Duke making a run to the Final Four or a championship. How many consecutive Sweet 16s is this, Caleb?
This is 3 straight. The first time Tennessee's ever made 3 straight.
That's bizarre. That's Duke, North Carolina stuff back in the day.
Oh, it is. 3 straight Sweet 16 appearances. The first time Tennessee's ever done that. The second time Rick Barnes has ever done that. I mean, they are it's just absolutely incredible what they've been able to do. And I mean, if they can make 2 straight Elite 8s, look, I'm just going to say this. Zakai Ziegler, if Tennessee beats Kentucky on Saturday or Friday, there is not a Tennessee player that will have had a team accomplishment ever that Zakai Ziegler didn't have at Tennessee. The only thing he's missing is a 30-win season.
Okay.
Kentucky will get you a 30-win season.
Yep. It's all on the table. The show represented by Banks & Jones, Tennessee's trial attorney, banksandjones.com. The show broadcast from the Ted Russell Ford Lincoln Studios, tedrussellford.net, tedrusselllincoln.net. Check their used and new inventory, East Tennessee's largest volume dealer. John Gruden gave Peyton the nickname the Sheriff, Dave. Okay, well, that's just more reason for me not to even like it.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm not a Gruden guy. I got to be honest with you. I'm not into the groomers. Yes.
I mean, despite the whole, like, we don't need to get into the stuff that he was accused of doing that got him fired by the Raiders. The way he played Tennessee because of his narcissism and the way he liked being courted. Do you know what John Gruden is, Dave? John Gruden is this. You ever been at a bar? You ever been at a place and there's the hot girl that's used to being courted. And she sees you and she's like, I'm ignoring you. And then you ignore her. And then she's like, I said I'm ignoring you. And eventually she's basically like, stop ignoring me, ignoring you. That's basically John Gruden.
That is John Gruden. That's a really good impression. It's not as good as Annoying Girl at the Bar that Saturday Night Live does. If you ever watch that.
I need to watch that
Girl you wish you hadn't talked to because she's so annoying. 2 minutes. Butch Jones is a lying idiot. We get into that with Caleb Calhoun. I'm Dave Hooker, Off the Hook Sports.
Like a blast from the past, the Super Dealer is back. Look to the skies, Knoxville. The Super Dealer is fighting for price, service, and the American made. Ted Russell Ford is East Tennessee's #1 volume Ford dealer. Save up to $4,350 on a new Ford F-150 XLT or get into a new Ford Ranger XLT with no payments for 90 days. Come see the Super Dealer today at either Ted Russell Ford location, Parkside Drive, or Kingston Pike.
Sports Treasures in North Knoxville is one of the South's largest sports cards and memorabilia dealers, featuring over 10 million sports cards from vintage to modern. Sports Treasures carries a full line of hobby boxes, singles, autographed memorabilia, Tennessee Vol collectibles, fan cave decorations, and so much more. See a museum full of collectibles at Sports Treasures, 4819 North Broadway in Fountain City, and Sports Treasures on Facebook. Sports Treasures, where the real sports fan goes to shop.
Community banking is about location and much more. It's about family. We reside in your community. We are a part of your community. At Commercial Bank, our commitment extends beyond the walls of our branches. It's displayed each day in the opportunities we provide, the money we give back, and the time we commit, all to help improve the lives of the people, families, and businesses that make our communities great. Commercial Bank, life made better.
Double D Piping provides full-service fire protection on any scale. From residential homes to government facilities, we can assist any customer through design, fabrication, installation, inspection, and demonstration of fire suppression systems. With 30 years of service across 5 states and a full staff with over 40 years experience, our quality can't be beaten. Don't get caught watching what you could have prevented. Call Double D Piping, the absolute best in fire.
Tennessee Center Cooper Mays here. Third down.
It's not third down. What are you doing?
A guy with a lot of jobs, but this one is the most important.
This is not government work. As such, I treat it with care and attention.
Until someone else calls. The Dave Hooker Show with Caleb Calhoun. Represented by T. Scott Jones. Banksandjones.com. Tennessee's trial attorney. From the Ted Russell Ford Lincoln Studio, East Tennessee's #1 volume and customer service dealer. Ted Russell Ford and tedrusselllincoln.net. Now to the Dave Hooker Show on Off the Hook Sports.
David said Gruden said Peyton laid down the laws in other team stadiums. That makes me like it even worse. That Gruden came up with it. Gruden has a lame backstory behind it. I just don't like anything about the Sheriff nickname. What's the best nicknames in the history of sports? Any of the
best nicknames.
The best, in my opinion, is the microwave. Benny Johnson, the backup guard for the Detroit Pistons. Do you remember him?
I don't remember him, but I know who you're talking about.
You're probably a little young back in the day. So, hot or cold?
Well, the best one is Charlie Hustle. Whatever you think of Pete Rose, like as the person, and I actually don't think he should be in the Hall of Fame. And I actually think I think betting on baseball is the crime of crimes. Charlie Hustle's a heck of a nickname.
Yeah, but you could throw that on anybody.
Not Pete Rose would sprint to first on a walk.
It'd be better if it was Petey Hustle. I mean, seriously, something Dylan says Megatron Calvin Johnson. That's a pretty good one, too. And if supposedly Jerry Jones ran escort services on our message board. I didn't know that, but I'm always glad to learn new things. Butch Jones's time at Tennessee was hot or cold, brought to you by City Heating and Air Conditioning, cityheatandair.com. We're going to get to something because Jones just flat out lied about his time at Tennessee. As you could imagine, he had a very optimistic memory when he talked about his time in Knoxville. What exactly did Butch Jones have to say, Caleb?
Yeah, so Butch Jones was on a podcast called Coaches and the Mouth. And
Coaches and the Mouth.
Yes.
Okay.
So in the interview, he was asked about his time at Tennessee. And here's his exact quote. At the University of Tennessee, had a great experience there in the Southeastern Conference. You know, we find out about life in the SEC. Going into our last year at Tennessee, we were 15-4 in our last 19 games, had won 3 straight bowl games, and finished in the top 10, I believe, 2 years in a row. And you're sitting at 4-6, and we had lost, I want to say, 15 players to the National Football League. It was the first time in about 17 years that they had that, and our program just wasn't quite where we could sustain that. We had to continue to build. We did have the number 1 recruiting class in the country at the time. J.C. Haun, number 1 overall pick. Michael Penix was our quarterback. Adrian Martinez was our other committed quarterback. So we had nailed it pretty good. But life in the SEC, 4-6, and you find yourself unemployed. There are so many levels of inaccuracies in that comment that he had to just know he was lying.
Hot or cold, brought to you by City Heating and Air Conditioning is now.
That's hot.
It is.
Where do you stand? Hot or cold? Brought to you by City Heating and Air Conditioning. Integrity matters. 50 years in East Tennessee. cityheatandair.com.
All right, hot or cold, here we go. Points out that a 15-4 record before the start of the 2017 season. So how are we defining hot or cold today, Caleb?
Idiotic statement. There's some validity to what he said.
Okay. I think it's cold. Why wouldn't you look back? Your best years should be your last years or your 4th and theoretically 5th and 6th and 7th year. So I don't know why you would bring that up. I just think it looks weak. So I'm cold on this comment.
Totally cold. And it's an idiotic statement because, okay, he was 15-4 before 2017. But what he doesn't tell you, Dave, is before 2017, he was 3-4 in his last 7 games.
Yes.
So he's just, it's just like, what? No, yes, you were 15-4 because from the middle of 2015, to his credit, after they were 3-4, they won their final 6 games, and then they start 5-0 the next year. They start 5-0 the next year. So they win 11 straight, peak with the Dobbs nail boot game in Georgia. Congratulations. Then they lose 3 of their final, they lose 4 of their final 7 regular season games that year. So okay, yeah, you were 15-4, but you're leaving out the part where you went 4-4 to close out 2016, a team that was by far the best team in the SEC East and did not win the division. But according to you, it's okay because they won the Life Championship that year.
Yes. According to the message board, we've got some people who think that Butch Jones is a little bit of an idiot. Dylan says it's funny how Butch just completely ignores the fact that he had a shot at the Sugar Bowl and choked away 2 games at South Carolina and Vandy. And that's not even a good South Carolina team. They're pretty respectable now. Never thought I'd say that.
That South Carolina team had a 17-year-old starting at quarterback who would
not old enough to vote.
Not old enough to vote, but old enough to beat Butch Jones. And that's what got them to a bowl game that year. By the way, Vanderbilt also got to a bowl game because they beat Tennessee. Both teams would have been 5-7. They finished 6-6. And that's why Tennessee didn't go to the Sugar Bowl that year. Those are 2 losses that are inexcusable with, by far, the talent-wise, Butch Jones never should have let that happen.
Hot or cold, brought to you by City Heating and Air Conditioning, cityheatandair.com.
Hi, Mike Davis here with City Heating and Air, reminding you to always dare to compare. Our team provides quality local heating and air service, installation, and maintenance across East Tennessee. We use only the best equipment like American Standard heating and air conditioning for your residential, new construction, or commercial needs. Honesty, dependability, and customer satisfaction have been the cornerstones of our business since 1961. City Heat and Air.
That's hot.
All right, mentions top recruits coming in for 2018. I'm cold on this because of some backstory. You might want to tell me exactly what he said, but he dog cussed a couple of my colleagues at other media entities, and to the point in which two of them decided they would make career changes. One had health issues because of the stress. I know there's a lot on the line, but screaming and yelling about a guy not getting another star is pretty pathetic. So ice cold on this, and you would never be able to change my mind.
I would agree with you if you were going to talk about 2014 and 2015. I'm actually hot about him saying this. I can't track to prove it was the number one recruiting class. My memory tells me that it wasn't number one. It was like top 5. But he did have J.C. Horn, who ended up being the 8th pick in the draft. Cade Mays was committed, who ended up being an NFL draft pick. And Adrian Martinez and Michael Penix Jr. Michael Penix Jr. ended up being a Heisman caliber candidate and played for the national title 2 years ago. So I funny enough on this one, and guys, don't get me wrong, there will be plenty of opportunities in a second for me to absolutely destroy what Butch Jones says, because what he says
love Butch Jones
is what I despise him. I can't get into how much I despise him. I think he's overselling the number one recruiting class. But there's no way to check that, because like they don't show like what the recruiting class rankings were in real time anymore in a certain moment. I'm pretty sure he's lying on that, but I'm still hot on this overall. Even though he's overselling it, he did have a lot of talent coming in. Now, most of that talent was bolting before he was fired. That's what he won't tell you. Most of those guys were leaving before he was even fired.
Derek said could have played Dobbs as a freshman, but played Worley. What an idiot he was. That's what's Ask Game had a strange feel about.
Derek, to be fair on that, again, I hate to be fair to Butch Jones twice, but like,
love Butch Jones.
No, he Dobbs wasn't ready as a freshman. Dobbs was not a good quarterback as a freshman. He improved dramatically from his freshman to his sophomore year.
Worley was so limited. I'm not arguing.
He was, but like,
I'm a big fan of throwing them out there. I've seen quarterbacks be their best.
But Butch did, because Worley had a season-ending injury, and the whole second half of the season, Dobbs was horrible in 2013.
Well, right, but I'm just saying I'm a big fan. Well, but you never get those first-team practice snaps back in preseason camp if you have a direction. If you're clear.
Butch Jones says there's mental reps, Dave.
There's not. All right, you're just watching a football game like the rest of us when you're doing mental reps. That's a fact. All right, Caleb, hot or cold, says back-to-back top 10 finishes. Did he say this?
Yes, and he lied. Tennessee under Butch Jones was in the top 10 for a total of 2 weeks out of his tenure, okay? The opening week of 2016 to open the season, and then week 6 after they beat Georgia off the Dobbs-Neal boot game. Those were the only 2 weeks in his tenure. Oh, wait, maybe week 7 because of the loss to Texas A&M. So 3 weeks. 3 weeks his whole tenure, they were in the top 10. And he comes out and says, we had back-to-back top 10 finishes. No, you didn't. You had back-to-back 9-4 seasons where you finished in ranked 20 to 25. That's not even close to the same, is it? Like,
yeah. And this one, to me, I'm going to go ahead and tell you that I'm cold on that because it's not factual. But the next one lost 15 guys to the NFL. I guess I'm cold on that too, because I thought that spoke to, I'd be interested if he mentioned how many people transferred. I mean, he's the type of coach that could destroy a program in this transfer portal era. And I think that might be happening at Florida State. I'm interested in kind of a case study because guys can transfer so much easier, Caleb. And he's the worst. If you had Butch Jones as the head of your program for 4 more years, you're probably dead on arrival.
Yes, you were absolutely dead on arrival. Okay, here's the crazy part about what he said, though, Dave. And this is the honest truth. This is what's even more pathetic and more embarrassing about what he said. Let's get this out here first. Butch Jones didn't lose 15 guys to the NFL. We have to make that part clear. He lost he's talking about going from 2016 to 2017. Here's what he's trying to say.
Dylan, I'm with you. And what did Butch do with those 15 NFL players?
Guys,
it makes you look worse.
Guys, he didn't lose 15 guys.
But he didn't. But it's not even factual.
Yeah, there were 6 players from the 2016 team that went on to the NFL in 2017. 6. That's not 15. That's a bit. No.
And he surely wouldn't be referring to his career at Tennessee or his tenure at Tennessee, would
Even
he?
if he was referring to his tenure, the 2 years before, nobody got drafted. So he lost a total going into 2017 from the 4 years before, a total in all 4 of those years of 9 players went to the NFL.
Okay, I mean this sincerely. I'm going to make it a poll question. Does Butch Jones, just in general, and vote on our poll question before I drop this one, is he in general just not very bright when he makes these statements? Or is he just flat out lying? Right now, better coaching move. Heupel running 2 tight ends has 32% of the vote. Barnes going 3-quarter press has 68% of the vote. Caleb, do you think he's nefarious in these statements, which would be lying?
I mean, like, in these statements, I think he's lying, but that doesn't mean he's not stupid too. I mean,
so he's both.
So, like, yes, he's both. I mean, this dude he's a pathological liar in this way. There's no way he could genuinely think. No, yeah, and I'm like just going through the list now of NFL guys, and I'm like, yeah, I'm not getting where 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14. Okay, like he's naming guys for his whole tenure at Tennessee and guys that left Tennessee too and went somewhere else. Like if you count the 15, it can count Dave. If you count Nathan Peterman as one of the guys you lost, even though Nathan Peterman transferred, maybe you can count that. Like this is such a laughably stupid statement, by the way. They didn't lose 15 NFL guys. Again, they lost 6 after the 2016 season. 6. That's it.
Okay, so based off recent comments, Butch Jones is stupid, flat out lies, probably both. And everybody's receiving votes. Probably both is taking off with a pretty impressive sprint there. Caleb, what do you think? Because I tend to believe in the good in people. That's what I try to do because I have my best intentions for other people unless they do something to harm me or my family. But I don't know. It just feels, and I bring that back up. The way he treated a couple of reporters, not just a couple, but probably 10 or more, double digits. And that to me was just
Dave.
Bad. I'll go flat out lies.
I'll go flat out lies too, even though he is stupid. But he's stupid because he thinks Tennessee fans would believe this. But here's the next part, Dave. I left out a part on this, and this is part of the same thing. He says, quote, we lost 15 guys to the NFL. And then he says, now remember, this is 2017. He's saying they did this. He said, it's the first time in 17 years that they had that. No, it's not. He's saying that they were losing more NFL talent than they were losing during the height of the former years.
Let me get you to share Dylan's comments because it's pretty insightful and a little graphic.
Butch is a pathological liar whose head is so far up his rear that his oxygen won't get to his brain, making him stupid. Yes, that's probably true. So which one is he talking about? First time in 17? Like, okay, if he wants to say first time in, it was more, I'll give him this. He touted the 3 straight bowl wins. It was the first time in actually over 20 years that they had done that, but they're meaningless bowl wins. No one cares when you're winning the Music City Bowl.
Okay, but here's the thing too, Caleb. Even if everything he said was true, it's not good enough for Tennessee and shouldn't be good enough for about 20 to 25 programs out there that consider themselves championship contenders based off what they have on campus in brick and mortar buildings and tradition. That's not good. What he said is not good enough, which makes me lean towards stupid.
What he said is not good enough. And what he's also said, it's just, I agree, but I can't get past the lying. That's a worse lie that I thought. It's not just the 15 guys to the NFL where he exaggerated. When he said it's the first time we had done that in 17 years. You're telling me that you were losing more NFL production? You're telling me Tennessee under you was sending more guys to the NFL than they were in 99, 2000, 2001?
No.
Like, are you serious?
Yeah, even and listen, I don't know the numbers, but if you go back and it would be all messed up because you at some point you go to a 7-round draft, a 12-round draft, but I think Tennessee was every bit as talented in some of those Johnny Majors years as they were with Philip Fulmer. and probably had as many players drafted. The other thing that worked against Tennessee in drafting on occasion is they had guys play up a position on defense. So, I mean, they were smaller guys, more prone to injury. So, I mean, that, we've talked about Eric Westmoreland. Would he have been, I'm not sure that guy couldn't have been a great safety, but all those guys were light. So you had injury issues with several of them, Caleb, but I don't remember any sort of influx of talent without being able to pull the stats that even compared to the early 90s or times in the 80s, and especially in 98, 99, and throughout Philip Fulmer's tenure.
No, I agree. It's funny. You're right. They did a lot of certain things. That's why scouts looked at Tennessee before they looked anywhere else. Funny enough, but yeah, it's insane.
What was his best season? Would be that third year?
The third year and maybe the fourth. Both years where he went 9-4, and the fourth year where Josh Dobbs set offensive records out the wazoo.
Okay, let's say fourth year. Josh Dobbs setting records. I think in retrospect, you had a special player there, and they win 9 games. But the simple fact is that's not good enough, and that's when your program should be peaking.
Yes, and I just want to point out, and I'm just doing some math here real quick because I'm just pointing it out to you that Tennessee lost more NFL talent in 2000 and 2002 and 99 and 98. Okay, had more players drafted all of those years than they did in 2016. And here's the crazy part, and we're going to get to our last thing that he said in a minute because it's like it's crazy, but I have to say that this is the same Butch Jones that said he talked about his decision to work for Nick Saban a couple years ago on a podcast, and he said at one point, Nick and I in many ways were identical as coaches.
Yes.
When you think Nick Saban and you think his top proteges, you don't think Kirby Smart, Dave. You think Butch Jones.
I think Butch all the way. Dylan says, give hype to 2016 roster and we're competing for a national championship. Probably. I think it's that roster was better than 2022 roster, and Tennessee did compete for a championship.
Heupel would have to get a different quarterback. I don't think his offense could work with Josh Dobbs.
I just think we're talking about talent level. I think
talent level elsewhere, but Josh Dobbs, he'd have to get another quarterback.
Nah, I agree. But you would think had he been there for a while, he would have gotten another quarterback. Now, I see what you're saying. He's not the best fit for them, but don't you think Josh Dobbs is smart enough that he could figure it out?
I think there's no level of intelligence that can make you run Josh Heupel's offense if you don't have a strong arm. I mean, that's just I think you have to have a base arm strength that Josh Dobbs doesn't have, honestly.
No, I can see that. All right, the show represented by Banks and
What
Jones.
about the last?
Yes.
We got one more quote from Butch Jones.
All right.
That's hot.
He says that the reason his 2017 was so bad was because he hadn't built Tennessee to the point where they could sustain the amount of talent that they lost in 2017.
Okay, I'm cold on that as well. How
that was year 5.
Yeah, I don't understand how. Really, nowadays it's year 2 or year 3.
Well, and also let's be clear on this. It's one thing if you can't sustain it, so you maybe go to 8-4, right? He went 4-6 and he finished 4-8 in the SEC. By year 5, you should never be going 4-8, right? At Tennessee, year 5, you cannot be going 4-8. So it's like, and he's saying 4-6 because he got fired after 4-6. Like his team would have beaten LSU the next week if he had stayed on as head coach.
Probably not. The show represented by Banks and Jones, Tennessee's trial attorney, banksandjones.com from the Ted Russell Ford Lincoln Studios, tedrussellford.net, tedrusselllincoln.net, East Tennessee's largest volume dealer. For Caleb Calhoun, I'm Dave Hooker. We'll visit with you tomorrow. Big show lined up. Jimmy Imes back from his spring break vacation. Also, Tony Jones, former associate head basketball coach at the University of Tennessee. So we'll talk some big hoops, get you ready for Tennessee, Kentucky. The madness continues. For Caleb Calhoun, I'm Dave Hooker, Off the Sports.